My name is Eva. I'm 28 years old and currently living and working in Boston as a financial strategy analyst. 1 week ago, just as I was about to walk into a meeting with the head of investments, I received a message from my mother. The family has agreed to sue you for being ungrateful. At the same moment, social media was flooded with photos from my younger sister Savannah's lavish wedding at a luxury resort in Vermont. Vera Wang gown, 7-course dinner, imported flowers, VIP guests. And me? I wasn't even invited. But I was expected to cover the debt. Have you ever been treated by your own family like a walking wallet? If you've ever felt like you existed only to fund someone else's dreams, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow me through the rest of this story, because what I'm about to share is far worse than just a family lawsuit. I still remember my grandparents' house on the outskirts of Quincy, Massachusetts. The roof was silver gray, lavender lined the walkway, and the faint smell of apple pie lingered every Saturday afternoon. That was home until I was 12, when my mother, Patricia, remarried Walter Green, a construction businessman from Philadelphia. When she told me we were moving to join our new family, I just stayed quiet. My grandmother stroked my hair and tried to smile. "You'll be fine, Ava. No matter where you are, you're still a strong little girl." What I didn't know was that this so-called new family would be the first place to teach me that blood doesn't always come with kindness. Walter Green was a composed man who always wore pressed shirts and shoes polished to a mirror shine. He didn't hate me, but he never truly saw me as part of the family either. From the beginning, I heard the way they talked about me, seemingly offhand remarks that made it clear I didn't belong. "She really does look like her father," Patricia once whispered to Walter, thinking I couldn't hear. "Remember that face?" Just like the burden I carried for those first few years. My name is Eva Ross, my biological father's last name. A man I remember only by the warmth of his voice and the strong arms that held me during thunderstorms. He died in an accident when I was 6. My mother never spoke of him again. And to the new family, the name Ross was an ink stain on the perfect family tree they were trying to create. When Savannah was born, everything became even clearer. She had her own room, painted warm cream with lace curtains and a princess bed. I lived in the basement, once a storage room, renovated, with old rugs and a broken desk. Patricia told me, "Savannah needs space to develop emotionally. You're already smart. You don't need much." By the time I was 16, they started using the word responsibility. The old Corolla I used to get to my part-time job, I paid for my own insurance, my private high school tuition. I had to apply for scholarships and tutor on weekends to get partial relief. Mom said, "You're good with numbers. Finance is the right path. Learn to manage money early." But when Savannah wanted to take a summer ballet course that cost $2,000, they didn't hesitate. New dresses, a piano, even a purebred corgi from Texas. She got everything she asked for. I used to think if I just worked harder and behaved better, I'd finally be acknowledged. But the older I got, the more invisible I became. Savannah was the pride of the family. I was just Savannah's sister, as if that was the only role I'd ever have. When I got accepted into Wharton with a partial scholarship, I timidly asked my mother if the family could help with the rest. She gave a dry chuckle. "Eva, you need to learn to stand on your own. At your age, I was already working through school. With your brain, it'll be easy." That same year, Savannah was sent to Italy for a short-term art program, all expenses covered by the so-called family fund. I remember sitting in my freshman dorm room, budgeting every dollar just to buy textbooks, while Mom posted photos of Savannah twirling in silk dresses in Florence with the caption, "Our beloved daughter, bringing light wherever she goes." And I wondered, did I have any light in me, or was I just holding a spotlight so someone else could shine? Throughout college, I worked non-stop. Morning shifts at a cafe near campus, research assistant for the finance department, and freelance data analysis for startup companies. Not once in those 4 years did my mother or Walter ask if I was okay or needed anything. But when Savannah needed help with a security deposit near her art studio after returning home, they messaged me. Could you pitch in a little? Your sister's following her dream. To them, I wasn't a daughter, I was a mobile savings account, a backup fund, someone self-sufficient, therefore always expected to help. Told myself I was used to it, but no one ever really gets used to being treated like a bank by their own blood. I used to think, as long as they were happy, I could bear it, until the day they sent me an envelope. Not a thank you, not an apology for the years they overlooked me, but a lawsuit for refusing to continue paying their bills, for not chipping in on a wedding I wasn't even invited to. And that's when I realized it was time to flip the story. Not for revenge, but to reclaim my name. Eva Ross, not the girl who studied finance, not Savannah's sister, and certainly not the walking wallet of the Green family. I didn't learn about Savannah's wedding through a phone call or a proper invitation. I saw it on Instagram while waiting for a bus after work, my fingers still smudged with ink from a freshly printed report. Savannah stood in a lavender garden at Montclair Resort, her white dress elegant and clearly expensive. Behind her, the words, counting down 30 days to the big day at Montclair. Sav and Zach. Tie. The knot. I stared at the screen. A hollow, stinging feeling spread through my chest. Not because I expected to attend, but because they didn't even think I should know. I kept scrolling. Each photo was another pinprick. A softly lit bridal boutique. Savannah glowing among rows of gowns. In the comments, my mother wrote, "Our little princess, deserving of all the best in the world." Below a behind-the-scenes video of their engagement shoot, Walter commented, "We'll do everything to make your day perfect, Sav." I pulled the phone closer. No one mentioned me. No one asked if I'd be coming. No one sent a single word. That day, Boston was gray and windy, and I stood alone in the crowd, separated from the world by something I couldn't name. A week later, I went home to pick up some paperwork. On the coffee table sat the wedding invitation. No one handed it to me. It was just left there, like it didn't matter if I saw it or not. I opened it. Embossed print, gold trim, elegant script. My name was spelled wrong. Ms. Eva Rose. And below it read, "We are honored to welcome you to celebrate with the Green Donnelly family." I quietly placed it back on the table and returned to the city. The wedding happened in mid-June, I found out through social media. Montclair Resort looked unreal. White orchids draped over archways, candle-lit banquet tables, a live jazz band in the garden. Savannah walked down a silk aisle, hand in hand with Zach, her new husband, heir to a hotel fortune. They live-streamed the entire ceremony. I watched it, unthinking, on my phone, when I saw my mother in a lilac lace gown giving a trembling speech. Something inside me broke. Not out of jealousy, but because I once believed if I tried hard enough, maybe I'd see that image meant for me. 3 days after the wedding, my mother called. Her voice was unusually calm. "Ava, can you come over this weekend? Your father and I want to have a little talk." I already had a feeling, but I said yes anyway. That afternoon, when I stepped into the living room, they were already seated. Mom poured tea, and Walter was tapping on his phone before setting it face down on the table, like he was preparing for a meeting. "We're really proud we pulled off such a beautiful wedding for Savannah," my mom began, "but to make it happen, we went a little over budget." I straightened my back. I understand. But what does that have to do with me? Walter jumped in, his tone flat, like he was reading from a script. "You've got a steady job and solid income. Frankly, we think it's time you take on a little more responsibility for the family." I didn't react right away. My eyes landed on the wedding photo hanging on the wall. Savannah, beaming, my mother beside her, their hands clasped like sisters. "What exactly do you mean?" I asked. "Just a small portion," Mom said quickly. "We just need you to help cover the rest of the wedding expenses. About $12,000. It's not much. You can do it in installments if that helps. I let out a laugh, but there wasn't a hint of joy in it. I'm being serious, my mother frowned. Savannah just got married. They have a lot to handle. I know you don't care about wedding dresses or big parties, so sacrificing a little feels fair, doesn't it? I stood up and picked up my purse. I wasn't the one who borrowed money to throw a wedding. I wasn't even invited. I don't owe anyone anything. Walter cleared his throat. We don't want this to get complicated. Then don't make it complicated, I replied. I'm not paying. End of story. I left the house in silence. A week later, I received documents from the court. The Green family had officially filed a lawsuit against me, accusing me of refusing to provide financial assistance to family members despite having the means. A civil claim written in emotionless legal terms, but at the bottom was my mother's signature, neat and precise, like she was signing off on a utility bill. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about money. This was their way of reminding me that I was never really their daughter, just an asset they could tap into, and when that asset stopped producing returns, they were ready to wipe it off the books. I remember exactly how it felt holding those court papers, like gripping a block of ice pressed against my heart. I thought I was tough enough, but I couldn't stop my hand from trembling as I turned each page. The words were cold, but they cut like knives. I immediately hired my own attorney. His office was on the 6th floor of an old building in the financial district. His name was David Mercer, early 50s, calm demeanor, steady voice, a former federal prosecutor. I knew he'd stay sharp without letting emotions get in the way. We sat in a quiet conference room. David flipped through the thick case file, then looked at me over his thin glasses. They're suing under Section 230 of the Pennsylvania Family Code, says that if parents fall into financial hardship, adult children may be required to assist with basic living expenses. I leaned back in my chair and pressed my lips together. So they're using the law to make me pay for my sister's wedding? David nodded slowly. It doesn't mention the wedding directly. They listed expenses like home maintenance, potential medical care, monthly living costs. But every charge popped up right after the wedding. And I didn't sign anything. There's no legal obligation, however, David set down the file and pulled out a thin sheet of paper. While reviewing the family's assets in preparation for our response, I found this. He slid the paper toward me. It was a property title statement. The house at number 47 on Elm Street, the one my parents lived in, was clearly listed under the owner, Eva Rose Donnelly. I stared at the line like it had just grown out of nowhere. That can't be, I whispered. That house belongs to Walter. They said they bought it after they got married. David shook his head. The property was purchased using an inheritance from your grandparents. The record clearly shows they left the house and the estate directly to you in a notarized will 11 years ago. My throat tightened. My mother never said a word about this, and they've been living there, treating it as theirs all along. I was quiet. Memories came back, piece by piece. During high school, I used to visit my grandparents' house often. It was the one place I felt safe, where I'd sit beside my grandfather as he told stories from his engineering days in Pittsburgh, where my grandmother made honey-roasted chicken every Sunday night. After they passed, Mom said the house had been sold to help pay for Savannah's tuition. I believed her. I never thought I had the right to ask. I took a deep breath. They hid this from me. David nodded, his tone lower now. And they've continued living there as if they own the place, registering all benefits under the name The Green Family. Meanwhile, the legal owner is you. I let out a dry laugh. So legally, they're suing the homeowner who's been letting them live rent-free for over a decade? David's voice turned sharp. Exactly. I sat quietly for a long time, staring at the document. The feeling wasn't just pain anymore, it was a full-blown rupture. Like I'd been locked in a room for years without realizing the key had been in my pocket the whole time. Can we fight back? David gave a small smirk. I just want to fight back. I want to tear off every mask they're hiding behind. He handed me more documents. They applied for home renovation grants 4 years ago, listed head of household, Walter Green. We can prove that's fraud. They had no right to request repairs on property they don't legally own. And if you agree, we can file for immediate repossession. I leaned forward, my voice firm. Then let's do it. If they see me as someone to exploit, I'll show them I know exactly how to calculate returns. They taught me finance, didn't they? Now it's my turn to use it. David nodded and pressed record on the table's voice memo device. Meeting transcript begins at 11:53 a.m. July 17th. Plaintiff, Eva Donnelly. Defendants, Walter and Patricia Green. The door closed softly behind me, but inside another door swung open, one that led toward truth, justice, and a reckoning for all the years I'd been dismissed. I returned to my Boston apartment with my mind like a chessboard, each piece being carefully set in place. That night, I sat down in front of my laptop, logged into my bank and credit card accounts, the things I thought I had under control. But now, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I started with the secondary credit card, the one I opened last year when my mother said she needed to buy some health items. She insisted it would only be used for medication and groceries in urgent situations. I believed her. She was my mom, and at the time, I was too swamped to check monthly statements. When I downloaded the past 6 months of e-statements, the first charge that made my heart stop was a $6,500 transaction at a luxury photo studio in Manhattan. The date? 10 days before Savannah's wedding. The description read, "Wedding luxury gold package final payment." I froze. No notification, no permission, not even an email. Next came the smaller transactions. A mother of the bride dress from Bloomingdale's, personal makeup artist services, a deposit for the rehearsal dinner at a high-end Italian restaurant. Every charge listed the same cardholder, Eva Donnelly. My teeth clenched, heart pounding, not because of the money, but because of how they used me like an invisible card. No name, no voice, just a silent obligation to pay. I opened the investment folder next. I'd received a few crypto investment ads sent mistakenly to my inbox months ago. I hadn't thought much of them. But now, I pulled up everything. Typing Walter Green plus cryptocurrency, I traced a string of exchange registrations linked to the Elm Street house. My legal address. On financial forums, I found an account he used to post about obscure altcoins. One line stood out, "This coin's gonna 10x soon." I'd bet the whole house on it. Then I found the debt disclosure from a brokerage service. A personal loan totaling $82,000 overdue by over 4 months. Borrower, Walter Green. Guarantor, Eva Donnelly. I stood up from my desk, hands trembling. My mother and stepfather had used my name to co-sign loans, pay for wedding expenses, and fund their lavish lifestyle, all without my consent. The next morning, I returned to David Mercer's office. "I want to file a countersuit," I said firmly. 3 counts: forgery, asset misappropriation, and financial identity abuse. David didn't flinch. He placed his hand on the folder I brought in. "Are you sure? This will escalate things far beyond a civil lawsuit. If the court approves, they'll face criminal investigation. They've treated me like a walking wallet long enough. If I don't draw a line now, they'll never stop." David nodded. "We'll need hard proof of forged signatures." I pulled out a packet of documents, including copies of receipts from the photo studio and the issuing credit card bank. Under the payment confirmation was a handwritten signature, Eva D., but the pen strokes looked nothing like my legal signature. "I've never even been to that studio. That's not my signature." David made a note, then turned to a receipt from the clothing store. "You didn't buy this dress either?" I shook my head. I've never even met that designer. Next, I presented the loan agreement signed by Walter Green, listing me as the guarantor. "I never signed any document tied to that loan." David paused. "So they used your name to borrow money, make wedding payments, and shift financial liability without any legal authorization?" I nodded. "They used my name, my address, forged my signature, everything." David inhaled deeply. "I'll send this file to the district attorney's office. With this evidence, we can initiate the countersuit by next week." I stood, gazing out the fogged-up window. The city outside was loud, as always, but inside me, was a deep, numbing silence. I no longer felt anger. What remained was a cold indifference, as if whatever love once existed had peeled away under the weight of greed. They hadn't just taken my money. They took my trust, my memories, and the reputation I'd spent years building. But they overlooked one thing. I had grown up. And I knew exactly how to hold them accountable, in the only language they ever seemed to understand: the law. The civil trial was scheduled for Monday morning at the Philadelphia County Courthouse. As I stepped out of the car, a row of cameras and microphones lined the steps. One reporter shouted, "Is it true you're countersuing your parents to reclaim ancestral property?" I looked straight at the glass doors without answering. I wasn't here to fight for assets. I was here to end a cycle of abuse that had lasted nearly 20 years. On the plaintiff's side, my mother, Patricia, dressed in an ivory pastel dress, resting her hand lightly on Walter's arm. He tried masking his nervousness with a calm expression. Savannah sat next to them, clutching her purse, avoiding my eyes. David, my attorney, whispered just before the hearing began, "Everything's leaning in our favor, but there's one witness I didn't get a chance to mention. They reached out this morning." Before I could ask, the judge struck the gavel, signaling the start of the hearing. The plaintiffs spoke first. My mother, voice trembling with carefully crafted emotion, said, "My daughter Eva was raised in our home. We paid for her education, her upbringing. Asking her to share some financial responsibility is not exploitation. It's her moral duty as a daughter." I remained silent as David took the stand. He laid out documents on the witness podium. "Your Honor, these are the defendants' Ava Donnelly's credit card statements, used without her consent to pay for wedding services, fashion items, and personal expenses for the plaintiffs. Included are records showing forged signatures compared with her registered legal signature on file. A handwriting expert was called in to testify. None of the 3 signatures match Miss Eva Donnelly's verified signature. Then came the will from my maternal grandparents, a document the plaintiffs clearly didn't expect us to have. In it, the property at 84 Elm Street was unconditionally bequeathed to me. No joint ownership. No stipulations. The will was notarized and signed by 2 independent attorneys. I glanced at my mother. Her face had turned pale. Walter dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. The judge nodded. "The legal ownership of the property is clear." Just when I thought everything had been laid bare, David signaled for the courtroom doors to open. A gray-haired woman in a blue wool coat stepped inside. My mouth parted in shock. It was Mrs. Rowley, the housekeeper who had worked for our family for over 10 years. She had been the only adult to ever speak to me gently in that house. I had no idea where she lived now, or if she even remembered me. But she walked in with a steady gaze locked on mine. David asked, "Mrs. Rowley, could you please explain why you've come today to testify?" She took her seat, pulling out a handwritten note from her pocket, her voice low but unwavering. "I worked for Patricia Green's household for over a decade. During that time, I heard her tell friends more than once, Eva just needs to keep her name on the paperwork to legitimize the assets. She owes me for raising her." The room fell into silence. David followed up. "You're certain those were her words?" Mrs. Rowley looked directly at my mother, without hesitation. "I heard them with my own ears, in the kitchen, while she was on the phone. Not once, but several times." The judge made a note. I didn't look toward the plaintiffs. Again, I already knew the look on their faces. Panic. David concluded, "Your Honor, what we're dealing with here isn't just a civil suit labeled filial duty. It's a calculated plan, using the daughter's name to seize property, forge financial records, and abuse family trust." The judge scanned through the entire stack of documents, then announced the court would reconvene in 3 days to review the evidence and issue a preliminary ruling. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the shutters clicked again, but I didn't flinch. I hadn't chosen this path, but if they thought I would stay silent forever, they picked the wrong daughter. I returned to the old house on a quiet, late autumn morning. No voices, no trace of perfume lingering in the hallway, no sharp sounds from the living room each time I passed. The house, per court ruling, was officially returned to my name. The Green family had been ordered to vacate within 30 days. The media wouldn't stop buzzing. Some headlines called me the rebellious daughter seeking justice, while others ran bold titles like Eva Green and the Fall of a Millionaire Family. But I hadn't come back to celebrate or feel victorious. I came to close the chapter, truly close it. In my hand was a checklist of items to inspect before renting the house out. I headed up to the attic, the only place my mother never allowed me to enter. The creaky wooden door groaned as I pushed it open. A faint light slipped in through a small window, dust floating in the air like mist. Near the far corner, a patch of bricks stood out. I stepped closer and placed my hand on it. It pushed inward. Behind the brick panel was a small, hollow space. I knelt down and pulled out an old metal box, dusty and locked with a rusted latch. I carried it to the kitchen, grabbed a few tools, and after several tries, the lock snapped. Inside was a bundle of yellowed papers, tied with a silver-blue ribbon. I pulled out the first letter. To Eva, if you're reading this, it means you found yourself. And perhaps you're finally strong enough to know the truth. I stopped. It was signed by Alyssa Green. At the bottom, it clearly read, your twin sister. I blinked. Twin sister? No one in my family had ever mentioned this name. I flipped through the rest of the letters, each one revealing a piece of a past I never knew. I was born 12 minutes before you. Back then, our mother didn't have health insurance. The doctors said delivering twins would be expensive. When you were born, I hadn't even been held before a woman walked in and took me away. I didn't cry. I didn't even get to ask why. But over the years, I realized I was part of a transaction. That family was childless, wealthy, and agreed to pay a large loan in exchange for adopting me legally. I became the trade. I could barely hold my pencil while marking the dates on the envelopes. It all traced back 22 years. When I was 3, my grandparents took me in, while my mother returned to Philadelphia with Walter. I used to think it was due to work or better conditions, but it turned out that was when they erased all traces of the daughter they'd given away. In another letter, Alyssa wrote, I came back to this house when I turned 18, on the day you graduated high school. I stood across the street, watching you walk out in a blue dress. You looked so happy. But our mother never once turned around. I think she was afraid you'd recognize me. But you didn't see me, and I didn't have the courage to step forward. My chest tightened. Her words pierced through corners of memory I thought were frozen. I sat on the floor and went through every letter. The last one was written in pale blue ink, without a date. I don't blame our mother, and I don't blame you. But if you're reading this, I hope you know I've always been watching from afar. I've always believed you'd find the truth. And if you want, I'm still here. No address, no phone number, just a final line beneath her signature. The Beckett family, Charleston. I sat there, my hands trembling. All those years I felt alone, cast aside, used. It hadn't just been me. Someone else, carrying the same blood, had suffered at the hands of the same people. And she was still out there, still waiting for something, to reconnect what had been severed for over 2 decades. I couldn't sleep that night. Lauren's words haunted my mind like a melody I couldn't shake. I called Ethan, my college friend, who now led a data security and biometrics tech team. His voice was groggy, but when I said I needed help finding someone who might be my erased twin, he paused, then said, "Send me samples of the handwriting and anything else you have. I'll do my best." I took photos of every letter, scanned Alyssa's delicate script, and sent them all, along with her name. Alyssa Green, the note Beckett family, Charleston, and the faint word Lauren scribbled in the corner of an old page. Ethan worked quietly for 3 straight days. On the 4th, he called back. I found a Lauren West, 36 years old. a nurse at a care center in Boulder, Colorado, adoption records from South Carolina, loosely tied to a lawyer who once represented the Beckett family in 2003. I stood frozen outside a small clinic in Boulder, a white house, calm and still, so different from the storm inside me. I saw her from a distance, soft brown hair tied back, scrubs in a pale blue shade, and eyes so much like mine. She was talking to an elderly patient, her smile gentle but distant. I approached and stopped a few feet away. "Lauren?" She turned, her eyes widened, but she said nothing. In that split second, I saw a flicker of recognition. No long explanations were needed. She looked at me, then quietly led me to a small break room in the back and closed the door. "It's you?" Her voice barely a whisper. "You're Eva?" I nodded, and in that moment, time collapsed. The decades, the lies, the loss. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We just stared at each other, studying every feature, every stolen trace. "I always wondered if you were happy," she whispered. I sat down, hands clasped together. I never understood why our mother wouldn't hold me, why my stepfather avoided calling me his daughter. But after reading your letters, everything became clear. Lauren gazed out the window. "The Becketts raised me kindly, gave me everything, my own room, piano lessons, summer vacations, but it never felt like home. No one held me when I cried. No one ever told me about you. I thought maybe you didn't exist or hadn't survived." I pulled out one of her letters from my bag. "I've read this over and over. What you wrote, it saved me from drowning in that childhood loneliness. I thought I was the only discarded child." "No," Lauren shook her head. "We were both chosen for what they needed. You were kept to legitimize an estate. I was given away for money. You lived without love. I lived without truth." We sat for a long time. Lauren spoke of her life in Colorado, her choice to become a nurse, a way to offer the care she'd never received. I told her about Philadelphia, about Walter, the stepfather who treated me like a burden, about the bills I carried since high school. Lauren stayed silent, then asked, "Do you resent them?" I exhaled. There were times I thought I'd never forgive them. But now, all I want is to know if you'll stay. Not because of what happened, but because we still have time. She took my hand, that hand, slender like mine, cool like those mornings our mother used to vanish. But it held on. "I want to stay. If you'll let me, I won't let go again." We agreed to meet our parents at a small cafe in our old neighborhood, the same one we used to visit when I was in middle school. A dim corner booth, soft light tracing the wrinkles on my mother's face and the exhaustion behind Walter's thick glasses. I placed my bag on the seat beside me and pulled out the documents I had prepared. Inside were birth records, with Alyssa's name, old photos of my mother holding two infants, one of them me, the other Lauren, and finally, the letters, living proof of a secret buried for over 30 years. Mom stared at the stack of papers like she was trying to burn them into ashes with her eyes. I said nothing. I waited while Alyssa, or Lauren, sat beside me, her hands clenched tightly beneath the table. She wasn't shaking, but I could tell her breathing had slowed, as if each breath cut a little deeper into the past. I slid the birth certificate toward Mom. "You still want to claim you didn't know anything?" She looked up. Her eyes were sharp, cold, without a trace of hesitation. "Don't be dramatic. You think a few sheets of paper are going to change the story?" I wasn't surprised, but Lauren frowned. She pulled a small photo from her bag, a little girl in a pale yellow wool dress, standing in front of the Children's Hospital in Charleston. "This was taken by Dr. Foster. He's still alive. He confirmed it was your signature on the custody transfer papers in 2003. Mom said nothing, but Walter's hand started to tremble. He leaned forward, bracing himself against the table, breathing hard. "Patricia, stop." "Be quiet," Mom snapped through her teeth. But he couldn't. It was your choice. You said we couldn't raise both. You said the other one could save the Beckett loan, don't you remember? You said one child is enough. One brings money, the other will raise her to be grateful. Silence. Something in me froze. Lauren closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. I looked at Mom. There were no words left. Nothing to justify, nothing to blame, nothing to pretend. Every curtain had fallen. So what about all the years I paid tuition? For myself, for Savannah? I asked. Mom crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair. You're still alive, aren't you? You have a home, a job, a name people respect. Savannah, she's more fragile. She needed more. She's like, and I didn't need anything? Lauren asked quietly. A 6-month-old baby sent away. No one cared how she would grow up? Mom gave a dry laugh. I have no obligation to you. You stopped being my daughter a long time ago. Walter dropped his face to the table. He didn't cry. He just breathed heavily like someone wounded where no one could see. I was weak, I know, but I couldn't stop her. I didn't need their apologies. I hadn't come for regret or some last-minute healing over a fracture that had rotted all the way through. I just wanted them to look at the truth. No more avoiding it, no more denial. I gathered the papers, folded them neatly into my bag. Then I looked straight into Mom's eyes, my voice steadier than it had ever been. From now on, don't ever use the word family when you talk about me. Lauren stood up first. I followed without looking back. No goodbyes, no farewells. As the cafe door shut behind us, the soft chime of the wind bell rang like an ending that didn't need words. And in that moment, I let go of a name I had clung to for so many years, only out of blind loyalty. I sold the Heritage House at the start of fall, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer saw myself belonging to it. That house used to represent everything I thought family was: pride, legacy, tradition, but in the end, it was just a cold shell, packed with transactions dressed up as affection. When the buyer signed the papers, I donated part of the money to charity, and with the rest, Lauren and I founded the Alisa and Ava Fund, a scholarship program for children abandoned by their families. We didn't seek glamour. Our office was a small wooden house on the edge of Eugene, Oregon, beside a quiet pine forest. I moved in with Lauren, originally planning to stay just a few months to set things up. But then there were those mornings with the smell of fresh-baked scones, those evenings when she read by the window, and I felt my heart slowly soften in ways I thought were lost forever. Noah was the first person I met in town. He taught philosophy at a local community college and often dropped by the used bookstore I liked to visit. We met when we bumped into each other between the shelves. I dropped a volume of Simone de Beauvoir essays, and he smiled, picked it up, and said, "You always go for the heavy stuff, both in thought and in weight, huh?" At first, our conversations were just short exchanges about ideas, life philosophies, and how people find themselves again after loss. But the coffee chats grew longer. The riverside walks became routine, and slowly, without saying it aloud, we fell into a quiet rhythm, unspoken, unforced, but close enough for me to start believing I could love again. One afternoon, while I was reviewing a grant application for a 10-year-old boy who'd been abandoned at a bus station, Lauren walked in and placed a cup of cocoa on my desk. The day I was taken away. It was fall, too, she said. I remember crying so hard. But no one looked back. Today we helped a child get into a school where no one will ever say, "He's not worth keeping." I took her hand, said nothing, but in my heart, I knew we were doing the right thing. We couldn't change the past, but we could make sure it didn't happen again. I wrote a letter to the family's former attorney. It was brief, without resentment, just a final note to close out the lawsuit paperwork. At the end, I wrote a sentence I'd carried in my mind for years, only now ready to put on paper. Family isn't where you're born, it's where you're not treated like a wallet. As I folded the letter, sealed the envelope, and added the stamp, it felt like I had finally put an end to a long chain of wounds I'd carried for most of my life. No more burdens. No more ties. That evening, I walked with Noah beneath a row of trees shedding golden leaves. He pointed at a few squirrels dashing between branches, then turned to me and asked, "Do you believe family is something you can build yourself, even without blood ties?" I nodded. I don't just believe it, I'm living it. We stood still on the gravel path without needing more words. The late sun lit up my hair, and his warm hand in mine told me everything. I had found the right place with the right person, living a life I chose for myself. My story might close here, but the questions it leaves behind still echo. Is family truly a place of safety, or is it sometimes the very thing we must walk away from in order to find ourselves? If you've ever faced something like this, ever felt used in the name of love, or had to stand for truth even when it meant being cast aside, you are not alone. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the choices I made, about forgiveness, starting over, or how we define who our people really are? Leave a comment below, tell your story, or simply share something that speaks to your heart. And if this story touched you in any way, please hit like and follow the channel. Because behind every picture-perfect family is a story that hasn't been told yet, and I have so many more to share with you. Stories that may seem small, but have the power to change a life.